The morning it happened, the coffee tasted like burnt dirt and I could smell rain in the pecans. I was halfway through fixing a loose porch board when the HOA president, everyone calls her Karen,
Ow.
though that isn't the name on her church bake sale name tag, walked up my drive with 2 clipboard toadies. She didn't say hello. She pointed to my chest like she was choosing a donut. "You have until 5 p.m. to pay $20,000 in fines," she said, "or we'll have you arrested for non-compliance." That word arrest hit me hard. My father taught me that a home is a promise you keep, not a fort you defend. He handed me the deed on the day he hung the flag over this very porch, told me a man ought to leave his land better than he found it. He's gone now, but I still talk to him when I sweep the steps each morning. I looked at the flag and then at Karen, and something in me shifted from polite to steel. "Arrested," I repeated. "For what exactly?" She rattled off citations: unapproved gravel for my side drive, a non-conforming paint hue on the shed that matches the Texas sky at sunset, a commercial vehicle in my driveway, even though it's my old F-150, and a decorative windmill that supposedly violates the maximum rotation permanent clause, something I swear they invented last week. 20,000, she said, or they would coordinate with law enforcement to detain me for refusing a lawful order. Behind her, one of the clipboard boys recorded me with his phone. The other smirked at my porch swing like he owned it. "This is your final notice," she added, sliding a glossy packet from her folder. "We're done being nice." I took the packet. The paper smelled like cherry toner. My hands didn't shake. "You're threatening me with arrest," I said calmly. "So you've already contacted the police?" "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "We have excellent cooperation with the department." I nodded. "Good," I said, and I opened my screen door. "Then you won't mind if I call them myself." In the kitchen, next to the jar of screws and a coil of baling wire, sits a landline that has survived storms and teenagers. I dialed one number, not because I can't handle a fight, but because I'm old enough to know which fights require witnesses. The call rang once. "Chief Hall," my wife answered, voice clipped, businesslike. "Hey, honey," I said, eyes on the porch. "We've got a situation on the south end of Sycamore."
Ow.
There was a beat of silence. "Are you safe?" "Safe as a church picnic. But the HOA just promised to arrest me by 5. I could hear her chair roll back. "Stay where you are," she said. "Do nothing. Record everything. I'll send a unit to document." "Copy that," I said, and hung up. I walked back out. "A patrol is on the way," I told Karen. "We'll get this on the record." Her mouth tightened. "Oh, we don't need to make a big show," she said. "This can be quiet between neighbors." "Quiet's for coffee," I said. "Not for extortion." "These are fines." I flipped the packet. The totals were sloppy, fat numbers stacked like hay bales. The dates looked off. Some citations predated the changes they referenced. Worse, there was a lien initiation fee with a handwritten note. "Arrest authorized if unpaid." That phrase sat there like a rattlesnake sunning on a rock. By the time the cruiser rolled up, the toadies had backed to the curb. Officer Ramirez stepped out. He's young, careful, doesn't swagger. He listened as I explained. He took the packet, read the note, and looked up at Karen. "Ma'am, who told you arrests could be made for HOA fines?" "The board voted on a policy," she said. "We have authority." Ramirez kept his voice neutral. "Arrest is a criminal matter. HOA fines are civil. Who told you otherwise?" She faltered. "We have..." "Advice? From an attorney?" he asked. "From a consultant," she said a little quieter. Ramirez radioed his report, photographed the documents, and asked me to email him scans. When he left, Karen found a scrap of righteousness. 5 p.m., she repeated. "This is your last chance." I didn't raise my voice. 5 p.m. is when we'll be sitting on my porch, I said, me and the chief of police, waiting to see who comes to put handcuffs on a homeowner over a blue shed and a windmill. She took one look at the flag, one look at me, and retreated down the drive like a cat that touched a hot stove. The rain finally broke, 2 slow drops on the porch rail. I felt steady. Angry, yes, but there's a kind of anger that stands still and lets the storm come. I texted my wife the photos. She texted back 3 words: "Do not pay." I stood in the doorway and thought about my dad's hands, nicked and scarred from a life of fixing what other folks broke. You don't let bullies invent a law on your lawn. You don't hand them 20 grand to make them go away. You stand your ground, even if your boots get wet. That was the last quiet minute we had that day. By noon, neighbors started stopping by. Some had their own packets, smaller numbers, same threat. A widow on Maple had a $3,400 fine for non-compliant mailbox slope. Young teacher down the block had $5,100 for unauthorized holiday lighting and unapproved yard art. They all asked the same thing. Can they really arrest us? I poured coffee, laid their packets next to mine, and told them to wait for the chief. I didn't tell them she's my wife. I wanted them to see the badge before the ring. At 4:52 p.m., thunder crawled across the sky. I heard footsteps, several sets crunching down my drive. Karen came back with more toadies and a man I didn't recognize. Square suit, cheap cologne, eyes that said he liked telling people no. Behind them, a black SUV idled with hazard lights blinking like it owned the block. The man stepped forward. I'm with HOA Compliance Solutions, he said, handing me a card. We're here to execute a board order. That's interesting, I said, folding the card into my shirt pocket. Because I'm waiting on law enforcement to witness whatever you think you're going to do, he smiled. We are law adjacent, he said. Buddy, I said. There's no such thing. The screen door opened behind me. Good afternoon, my wife said, stepping onto the porch in a navy blouse. Badge on her belt, hair still damp from the rain. Chief Hall, who exactly told you you could threaten citizens with arrest over HOA fines? The man's smile died where it stood, and the storm finally began. My wife isn't tall, but she carries a room. She introduced herself, confirmed I was the complaining party, and asked everyone to state their names and roles for the audio recorder she set on the porch rail. The square suit introduced himself as a compliance contractor. Karen called herself president with an extra spoonful of sugar. The toadies were board assistants. A few neighbors hovered under umbrellas at the edge of the yard, pretending they were just out for air. Let's be clear, my wife said, her tone even. Arrests can occur for crimes. Trespassing, fraud, violence, threats, interference. HOA fines are a civil matter. Who told you that you could threaten arrest to coerce payment of a debt? Square suit shifted. Our policy allows for law enforcement coordination, he said. Refusal to comply can escalate. Into what statute? My wife asked, eyes steady. She's not one for theatrics. She's a facts and forms woman. I love her for it. He opened a binder. It was glossy, tabbed, and useless pages of best practices from a consultant firm in some other state, with footnotes that sounded important until you read them. My wife turned each tab with gloved fingers and took photos with her phone. Slow as Sunday. Where's the legal opinion? She asked. The actual attorney letter? He glanced at Karen. She lifted her chin. We have solid advice. From whom? My wife asked. A consultant, Karen said again. You've said that, my wife said. What's his bar number? Silence. The hazard lights on the SUV clicked and clicked. My wife looked at me. Do you have other packets? She asked, and I handed her the stack neighbors had dropped off. She spread them across the porch table like a card dealer in a smoky back room. Same totals and threats in different handwriting. Same arrest authorized if unpaid scribble in the margins. She made 3 piles: contrived violations, bogus timelines, and threat language. Officer Ramirez's report is filed, she said to the group. We have a complaint of coercion threatening criminal action to collect a debt. That can fall under extortion statutes. It can also be a deceptive trade practice. Squaresuit tried to recover. Chief, we're simply enforcing community standards. People sign the covenants. People sign rules, my wife said. Not your fantasies. She flipped to a page with lien initiation protocol. Who drafted this? She asked. It references immediate custodial action and cites a statute that doesn't exist in this state. One of the toadies stammered something about adapted language from a template. My wife took his statement. down word for word. Neighbors stepped closer under the eaves. The widow from Maple held her packet like a shield. The young teacher kept shaking her head, small and constant. "Here's what's going to happen," my wife said. "We're going to document all of this. You will not contact homeowners about payment using arrest language again. You will not set foot on private property without permission. You will not tow vehicles from driveways under color of law. If you believe a violation exists, send a notice and proceed through civil channels like every other HOA in this county that remembers what country it's in." Karen tried to rally. "Chief Hall, with respect, this is outside your scope. Your bylaws don't deputize you," my wife said. "You want to collect? File a civil lien and argue it in court. But threaten arrest again, and I will have an investigator knock on every door tied to these letters. Do you understand?" Squaresuit's jaw clenched. "You're interfering in HOA governance." "I'm preventing you from impersonating the justice system," she said. "There's a difference." He shifted to another angle. "Your husband is involved. You're conflicted." "You're right," she said, nodding. "Which is why I asked Officer Ramirez to initiate the report, and why. I'm calling the county attorney's office to request an independent review. I'm here to preserve the peace, ensure nobody gets hauled away over a made-up felony, and make sure you leave when I ask you to." He didn't like that. "Bullies rarely do." "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe," my wife said, "but it won't be today." Karen took a step forward, finger up like a metronome. "You homeowners are always playing the victim," she snapped, voice cracking. "Do you think it's easy to run a community? To keep property values up? To stop people from trashing the neighborhood with junk cars and tacky lawn art?" "Ma'am," my wife said, "step back from the porch." Karen looked at me then, straight into the place where my patience lives. "You think you're special?" she said. "Because your wife wears a badge. Because your daddy left you land. Rules are rules. Pay your fines." "My father left me a shovel, a flag, and a mortgage," I said. "Everything else we built ourselves." Thunder rolled. The rain picked up. My wife nodded at me, just a tiny nod that said, "I'm hearin'," then turned to the crowd. "We'll hold an open meeting at the firehouse tomorrow at 6, she said, projecting her voice down the block. "Bring your letters. Bring your questions. We'll have the county attorney and the registrar of deeds present. We're going to talk about liens, due process, and the limits of HOA authority. If you're on the board, you're welcome. If you're a contractor, bring your proof. But you're not going to threaten arrest again. Not in this town." Squaresuit snapped his binder shut. "This is harassment," he said, retreating. "You'll hear from our counsel." "Can't wait," my wife said. They left in a huff of wet gravel and hazard lights. The neighbors exhaled like they'd been underwater. I poured more coffee and felt the knot between my shoulders loosen. I looked at my wife. "You going to get in trouble for this?" I asked softly. She shrugged. "For protecting people from a shakedown?" She squeezed my hand. "Let them try." That night, we pulled the old deed from the gun safe. The paper is crisp from age. My father's signature, steady as a fence post. We stacked it with the HOA covenants, the state property code, and a printed copy of the extortion statute. My wife set up a whiteboard in the dining room like she was prepping a briefing. "Here's the trap," she said. "They manufacture violations, stack fines, then write scary letters that misuse criminal language to scare folks into paying. Some pay, some don't. Those who don't get a visit? Law-adjacent?" I said. She grinned. "That's not a thing. We worked past midnight." The house was quiet, except for the dryer ticking and the dog sighing at our feet. I kept thinking about the widow's hand shaking, about the teacher's eyes, about my father's flag snapping in the wind. At 5:17 a.m., my wife's phone pinged. "County attorney. We'll be there. Registrar. We'll bring record books." An investigator from the state's Consumer Protection Unit added, "Heard rumors about this consultant." "We're coming." The sun rose slowly, pushing pink through the rain clouds. I brewed a fresh pot. The day felt like the moment a storm breaks. Brakes whined, still, charged, ready at noon. A rumor rolled down the street like a wayward tire. The board had voted in an emergency session to authorize immediate enforcement actions. Around 2. A tow truck cruised the cul-de-sac, like a shark circling a dock. At 3, Square Suit reappeared, shadowed by 2 private security goons in uniforms that looked official from 30 yards away and silly up close. At 3:05. Before they could knock, the sheriff's Explorer turned the corner with its light bar off, but presence unmistakable. My wife met them at the walk, handed the sheriff the extortion letter copy, and pointed to the security badges. The sheriff took one look and smiled without humor. "Boys," he said, "take those shiny Halloween costumes off my street." They melted faster than cream in July, and for the first time in 2 days, I laughed. The firehouse smelled like diesel and coffee. We set up folding chairs, and by 6 o'clock, every seat was full. Folks stood in the bay between the ladder truck and the rescue boat. The county attorney wore a tie that had seen 100 town halls. The registrar of deeds had a rolling case with color-coded tabs. The consumer protection investigator leaned against a cinder block wall, hands in pockets. Taking everything in, my wife opened the meeting and then stepped aside to avoid the conflict of interest mess. The sheriff's liaison moderated. "We're here for clarity," he said. "Not a brawl. Everyone will be heard." Neighbors came up one by one. A retired lineman with a $7,800 landscaping harmony fine, a single mom with a $2,200 improper recycling bin concealment penalty, a veteran with a letter telling him his service flag violated flagpole height norms. Each packet held the same snake, a bold, underlined threat of arrest if unpaid by an arbitrary date. When Karen took the mic, she wore pearls and patience. She called the letters firm reminders and motivational language. She said property values were fragile. Ecosystems. She made it sound like she had personally stopped Rome from falling. The county attorney, polite as Sunday, asked her to point to the statute authorizing arrest for unpaid HOA fines. She spoke for 2 long, wobbly minutes and produced no statute. The registrar then explained like a grade school teacher how liens actually work: notarized documents, court filings, notice periods. Threatening arrest, she said, is not part of that process. Square Suit tried to salvage it. He flashed a slide deck with logos and arrows. He used phrases like holistic enforcement framework and escalation matrix. The investigator finally stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "show us the legal opinion that says you can threaten arrest." Square Suit swallowed. "We have templates used successfully in other communities." The investigator nodded once. "Where threats of arrest were used?" "In a manner of speaking, show me the names of those communities," the investigator said. Square-Suit declined. Citing confidentiality, the room made a low, unhappy sound. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. A quiet man in a work shirt crew cut, greased under his nails, stepped up with an envelope. "I do maintenance for the HOA," he said. "Trash cans, signs, that kind of thing. Last month, these folks hired me to hand-deliver some letters. They gave me this to leave if no one answered." He pulled out a stack of door hangers. The top read, "Final warning, law enforcement action pending." At the bottom, a seal that looked official until you noticed the eagle had 5 stars on one side and 3 on the other wrong. Off. Fake. The investigator took one, then handed it to the sheriff's liaison. "Who printed these?" the investigator asked. Square Suit waved his hands. "Design choices," he said. "No one is impersonating Stop," the investigator said, voice level and cold. "Using a badge-like seal and threatening arrest to collect a private debt can constitute a violation of our state's Deceptive Practices Act, and, depending on intent, criminal impersonation." The room went from simmer to boil. The sheriff's liaison turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to ask you and your contractor to step outside to answer a few questions." Karen sputtered about witch hunts. Square Suit asked for a lawyer. The 2 toadies stared at their shoes and then asked for the bathroom. The liaison escorted them out. The bay doors were open, and you could hear the cicadas starting their evening song steady, indifferent to human foolishness. The county attorney turned back to the room. "Here's what we'll do," he said. "Our office will send a cease and desist to the HOA regarding any criminal language in their collections. We'll audit the fines and require proof of each violation. If the board cannot substantiate, those fines will be voided. Any money collected under false threats will be returned. If you feel intimidated or threatened, document and report it. We'll coordinate with state consumer protection on any broader enforcement." Applause started in the back and rolled forward like thunder. A neighbor asked the question that matters most. "What about our board? Can we fix that?" "You can," the registrar said. "Read your bylaws. There's a recall process. Follow it cleanly. No shouting matches in parking lots, no Facebook wars. Petition, vote, replace. And next time you elect folks, pick people who love the neighborhood more than they love control." After the meeting, people hugged in that awkward, relieved way that happens when fear leaves a room. The widow from Maple's hands had stopped shaking. The teacher laughed, sudden and loud, like the first dry crack of a log that's finally caught fire. My wife kept her distance professional lines, but when no one was looking, she brushed her fingers along my sleeve, a touch that said later, by the next week, the recall petition was everywhere, at the hardware store, the diner, the church foyer. Folks who had never agreed on mailbox paint agreed on this. The sheriff's office announced an investigation into deceptive collection practices. The investigator asked anyone with letters to email copies. Stories poured in from other neighborhoods, same consultant, same template, same scare tactics. Karen's pearls went missing from the HOA Facebook profile. Squaresuit stopped cruising our block. The hazard light SUV never came back. 2 toadies resigned to spend more time with family, which is small town for we picked the wrong team. We had our recall vote under the pecan trees at the park. Long tables, lemonade, kids running between knees. The registrar supervised, the ballots were counted twice. And when the results were read, the cheer sent 100 birds into the air. New board, new chair, new tone. Their first act was boring in the best way. Adopt a plain English policy that matched state law. Fines had to be real, verifiable, appealable. No one would ever receive a letter on our street that used the word arrest unless a crime had actually been committed. After the vote, the sky had that late summer glow like the world had been washed and hung to dry. We sat on the porch swing, the board fixed tight under my boots. The flag barely moved. I thought about my father's lessons, about the right way to be stubborn. I thought about how power behaves when no one watches them, how it shrinks under a good light. "You did good," I told my wife. She shook her head. "The town did good," she said. "I just brought a flashlight. You were quiet a long time." You could hear the creek talk to itself, low and steady. I breathed easier than I had in months. Not because we'd won victory as noisy and temporary, but because the quiet felt earned. It felt like justice that didn't need to brag. Here's what I learned. And maybe it's nothing new. Bullies don't always kick down doors. Sometimes they mail you a letter with a fake badge and hope you scare easy. Sometimes they sound official and count on you not to ask the second question. But paper isn't law, volume isn't authority, and threat isn't truth. A neighborhood is a covenant of trust. If someone tries to rule it, they've already forgotten what it's for. If you're older, like me, and tired, and the gravel crunches in your knees when you walk to the mailbox stand anyway, stand until someone else stands with you. It might just be your neighbor. It might be your wife. It might be the quiet kid down the block with a stack of door hangers he knows are wrong. But that's how it happens. One person says no more, and the rest remember their voices. Have you faced an HOA like this? Tell me in the comments. I read every word. Your story might be the one that helps the next neighbor. Find his courage. And if you believe some fights are worth having, fights for decency, for truth, for the simple right to drink coffee on a porch you paid for, hit subscribe. Let's stand up together and keep our neighborhoods honest.